Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Quarantine Series. I'm your host, Kabir Segal, Quarantine Film Series, coming to you live from the ATL, Atlanta, Georgia. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Thanks for watching downstairs. I appreciate it. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Great to have you here all around the world. We're excited when people all around the world check it out. So this is a project. This is an effort to put the spotlight back on the creative people. These are the filmmakers, the authors, and musicians that create, the stories and the music and the content that provokes, entertains, and challenges us just throughout the year. So if you can, please support the projects that you discover on this broadcast. Very important. Also, think local. The local bookshop, the local musicians, local filmmakers. I think artists and audiences, we need each other. So let's do what we can. If you want to know who will be on the show, you can always subscribe to my social media, available on all platforms. So you'll be the first to know, or the second to know, or the 1,000th to know. Just depends when you check. And let us know where you're watching from. We got Atlanta in the house. We got New York in the house today, Eastern time. But all of those of you watching Australia and Malaysia and South Africa and Prague, let us know where you're watching from. Drop it in the comment field. I'm always interested in learning about cities, states, counties, area codes, zip codes, provinces, extra points for provinces, you Canadians. In addition, if you have any questions, I don't have to ask all the questions, but if you have a question on your mind, drop it in the comment field. Doesn't matter if you're watching live or on the rebroadcast. I want to know what's on your mind. We'll be sure to opine to your questions. All right, now for the best part of the show, we get to meet the remarkable artist. She really is remarkable. And, one thing I like about the show is sometimes you get to check in on some of your friends. I've known her for a little period. She's one of the first people I've ever met in the movie industry. I didn't actually even know there was a movie industry really until I connected with her. So things you learn in life, huh? So she's an award-winning producer, filmmaker, doing things at the highest level, making the films that, are like on the channels that you watch. We're going to talk about some of the projects she's been involved with, Rebuilding Paradise, Tigerland, The End. She's the founder of her own production company. So she's an entrepreneur. So please welcome to the show live from New York, the maestro herself, Xan Parker. Welcome.
Thank you.
Great to see you. First, I got to ask you, Xan, tell me about the quarantine. How has it impacted you? How has it impacted some of your projects?
Quarantine has impacted almost everything. With production, I would say that, I was in a very early casting stage for a show that I was doing. And that just casting was really, really hard because a lot of people really didn't want to take calls, that weren't very important to them and very personal. And so I think a casting phase that should have taken us 6 to 8 weeks ended up taking us, over 2 months. And then production itself was a challenge. We tried all different kinds of solutions. I think in the end, what my diagnosis of the whole thing, or my analysis of the whole thing, is that everything in filmmaking during COVID is 25% more expensive, 25% slower, and 25% less fun.
I hear you. Unless you're drinking the day away.
Would help.
Yeah, exactly. Tell me, if you can, just about your typical day. What's the typical day for Xan Parker, the person? As in, is there a daily walk? Is there a cup of coffee? How do you make sure it doesn't feel like Groundhog Day?
Yes, it does feel like Groundhog Day. I have 2 kids at home. I have 2 teenagers, and one of the hardest things to do, but I think we finally accomplished it at home, is to create a routine for them that makes sense, because they were so used to, of course, going to school every day and kind of having that, you get up at a certain time, you're home at a certain time, mom comes home from work and dad comes home from work at a certain time. And that's when you tell them you've got homework. But now it's very different. My husband does the bulk of the kind of, being around, making sure people are logging into their chemistry class during the day. And then I do the homework help at nighttime. I have started in the past few months coming into my office more, mainly to get away actually from the schooling, because they come to me first and that's a challenge getting things done. The good thing, I would say, the sort of small silver lining of COVID has been, because we're all working remotely or separately. And so the show that I was show running, which is, just wrapped, I was not in the office. And so my hours would be a little bit different. I could do more things. I could check in, with other projects more. So I was able to kind of be a little bit more of an octopus. The downside of that is that you're always working.
Yeah. Octopus is my teacher for sure. Tell me about some of the projects you're involved with. It's very exciting to know about rebuilding paradise and just the epic nature of this project. How did you get involved with it? Why did you get involved with this particular story?
Well, it's first of all, I have to remind everyone that it is going to air on National Geographic globally on Sunday, November 8th, which is the 2-year anniversary of the huge wildfire that the film concentrates on. I had done a film with one of the executive producers the year before called Tigerland. And so he called me up and asked me if I would join this project. It was a very kind of special project because this is Ron Howard's first he's done a few documentaries, but this is his first cinema verite documentary, and he really didn't know anything at all about cinema verite. So he needed someone who could guide him through that process and keep the ball in the air when he wasn't available, because he was also doing a feature film at the same time. So they asked me to join a couple months after they started the project, because they realized that they really needed this kind of support. And so I came on board. I think I was at Sundance with my film Tigerland in January of 2019. And I left Sundance and went straight out to Northern California and began shooting. And I was in the field pretty much all of last year in Paradise, California and the surrounding area. I think I had 75 cumulative shoot days, which is a lot. And guided Ron Howard through the process of cinema verite filmmaking, and then, the process of editing a cinema verite film, which is very different than a scripted film or a historical or interview-based documentary. And it was, it's a great thrill because it was a gift to get to know this whole community. And it was really a tough but fulfilling journey to go through a year of emotional repair with them and to see the changes that took place. And it was also a blast working with Ron Howard. I mean, even though he doesn't know cinema verite, he knows storytelling. And so I learned a lot from him.
Certainly seems that. A question coming in, how did you stay safe in the filming of this? Because a lot of it's, you're in close proximity to a dangerous situation. So how did you maintain those protocols?
Well, during the filming, I went there after the fire was over. So there was no more of that danger. There were some forest fires in the fall when we were out there filming, but nothing like this year. So it turned out that the fire that the film is about is called the Camp Fire. It was the largest and most destructive and most lethal wildfire in California's history, maybe in the United States history too. And that fire season of 2018, when that took place, was epic and just incredibly destructive. And so many people died and firefighters fell apart. There was a lot of pain that year. The following year, when we were finishing the film, was a very mild wildfire year. That was 2019. And then this year, 2020, has been very, very scary. And some of my, friends, because I now count them as my friends up in Northern California, have had to evacuate, and they've had their, power turned off in order to, stave off the possibility of setting fires. And they've been contending with it a lot this year.
Yeah, what I like about this film is it's a microcosm kind of what's happening throughout the state, throughout this region. What kind of takeaways do we learn about, or have you learned about how we can prevent these, or any mitigation to prevent this from happening? This year's been quite tragic. Anything you can provide there, because it seems like it's a recurring thing, and how do we abate this?
Well, I feel like there's sort of a really kind of granular, very intimate, personal level lesson. And I also feel like there's a takeaway that's so kind of big and global and universal that you can only kind of take it at that level. I think to me, the lessons are a little bit less about, make sure you rake your lawn and make sure that you're you've got your sprinkler system or all that kind of thing, or don't live too close to, wildfire prone areas. That's something that we can't really change, or people can change it a little bit, but it's so hard, to kind of put policy in place and laws in place that will actually guide that. But on a personal level, and this I really learned from the people there and from the first responders, is be accountable to yourself and your neighbors and your friends and your family. Like, that's who you're doing everything for, right? So how you how you avoid natural disaster or man-made disaster, or how you survive it, or how, it's all about taking care of each other and taking care of yourself. And that's sort of maybe a sort of philosophical or existential way to look at it, but it's important. And I think it actually applies to all of us everywhere. Is that, just think about your community, be involved, engage, know people, know your local politicians. All those kinds of things make you stronger and more resilient when something happens. So that's just the kind of personal, intimate level stuff in terms of preventing. And I'm not talking about preventing fires, I'm talking about preventing pain and suffering. On the huge level, we're all culpable. We're all contributing to climate change, and we've all, and going back generations, have contributed to policies and use of land and and use of environment and materials that have gotten us to the point we are right now. So if someone watches the film and thinks, I don't want anyone to go through that kind of pain again, then think about like big global level things that you want to see changed, and also think about, are you engaged in your community?
Yeah, well said, well said. I mean, I've heard, about documentary filmmaking that it's kind of like, there's a building block and you strip away to get the story. So talk about this project. Did you know the arc ahead of time? And you talked about the verite approach. Did you know the arc going ahead of time, or was it really revealed in the edit what the story was?
That is actually the $1 million question on this one, because we didn't know the arc. I mean, I suppose there are filmmakers or artists. I know there are photographers that are out there chasing disasters. But, most of us don't do that. So, okay, this is not a plot that we're used to following. This is not something where we can go, oh, it's going to be a political campaign we're going to follow, or it's, a family struggling in poverty, or it's, here is someone who's trying to overcome whatever this particular challenge is. It is actually unknown, and it's huge because it's a whole community. So how do you figure that out? One of the first steps we took was to try to understand how natural disasters affect communities and people. And that's different too, like on the personal level versus kind of on your social and community level, and your direct environment of people. So in order to do that, we watched a lot of the films that had been made about Hurricane Katrina, because there are a lot of really good films about Hurricane Katrina. And if people want to watch two of my favorites, one of them is Trouble the Water, which is very intimate inside it was made by filmmakers who were like trapped in New Orleans, when they were waiting for help from the government. And, they were filming sometimes with like their, in water up to their knees. And then another one that's really good is, although Spike Lee made a one that's well respected for HBO right off the bat that I can't remember the name of, but the best one he made was after the BP oil spill, a year or two later. It's called If God is Willing, the Creek Don't Rise. And that one is a great analysis of like how a city changes and morphs and kind of takes this tragedy and this disaster and all this suffering and all this change in, and kind of makes it part of the fabric of, sort of what they want politically and socially for their community. So we watched those, and that helped a lot. And then the other thing we did was, my co-producer, Liz Morhaime, who I do have to give a shout out to because she really was my partner in crime. She's an amazing producer. She discovered online somewhere this kind of very basic dime store psychology graph called the emotional life cycle of a disaster, which if you looked up quickly, you could find. And it's a graph that charts the emotional well-being of a community or people after a disaster. And so, it has this pattern, and we looked for that when we filmed, and sadly, the entire town tracked with that graph. So it kind of was our roadmap, and it's a sad one, because at first you really kind of, obviously the tragedy hits and everyone is decimated, but then there's that feeling of, we survived, we're okay, like our family's okay, we're all safe. Who cares about our stuff in our house? We're okay. And there, acts of heroism that you hear about, and you feel really good, and people are donating, and, World Central Kitchen shows up, and it's all going to be great. And then there's just this long, slow, emotional decline, because it's what you've lost is, and this is important, it's not just your stuff. It's like your whole life just got blown up. And that takes a while to really realize. how that's going to impact you, and realize how much you really liked your life the way it was. Everything looks different. Everything feels different. You don't have the things, you don't have the relationships, you don't have the, you don't have the roads to drive down to get to the store that you always go to get your favorite thing. That's what really brings people down.
Yeah, it's that, and I hear you, and I think that graph is consistent in a way, and glad you're able to share that with our audience. By the way, I think it was When the Levees Broke with Spike Lee, his
that
project.
was the first one. It's the
Yeah.
It's the second series he did. If God is Willing and the Creek Don't Rise, that I find to be a much better film.
Got it. I do want to ask you about Tigerland. Let's talk about that for a second. What a amazing, fascinating film this was. Tell us about this project, why you wanted to get involved, these beautiful animals, and what the audience should know.
It was really a fluke, I have to say, because I am more of a people follower than an animal follower, I'll admit. And I'm allergic to cats. So there were moments. But I was called up by a old friend of mine, Ross Kaufman, who I'd done a lot of projects with. And same thing for him. He kind of was like, I don't know, wildlife conservation film. This sounds like fun. Discovery tapped me for it. Do you want to work with me on it? So both of us got to know wildlife conservation. We really spent a bunch of months. Discovery was very supportive in that. A bunch of months just learning and meeting people and talking to the people who are doing the work to save this, very rare and very amazing species. And we learned a ton, and we met phenomenal characters, and we got really excited about it. And then we ended up approaching it just like we would any other verite documentary film that we make. This one was really fun because we decided to kind of play with it, because tigers are like these iconic creatures that are sacred in some cultures, and they are represented as gods in some cultures, and in other places they're considered these dangerous, scary things. But they are very exotic. They're very, very beautiful, and they're very important. We decided to play with format, so we have a little animation in the film. And we have, some historical archival material, which we gave special treatment to. And then we have a lot of, I would say, like, impressionistic approaches in terms of how we're filming. The one full verite story that we did was in Far Eastern Russia, where the Amur tiger lives. So the Siberian tiger, most people think of it. It's not totally white, but it is lighter and bigger and fuzzier. And so we went there, and we just happened to go there when a mother tigress had been captured because she was entering a village. And so then her two cubs needed to be captured as well, just so they would be safe and get through the winter. And so we got to follow that process, which was incredibly exciting. And then we also went to India and dug into the story of an incredible champion of the species, Kailash Sankala, who was actually the person who was very much responsible for getting tigers onto the Red List, which is an important international wildlife conservation sort of guide to what's endangered. That's where species are rated as endangered or extinct. So he did a lot in India, like I would say, like in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and his grandson helped walk us through that story.
It's a beautiful film. I encourage everyone to watch it. Xan, I want to ask you, in your words, in your opinion, what makes a good producer?
So many things. Producers are all different and have different skills. Bringing in money, building a good creative team, nurturing that creative team, helping that creative team hone a vision that's doable on the schedule and budget that you have, or, making one meet the other. Those are the broad strokes. My particular skills are that I also ghost direct, and that I, know verite quite well. And I would say I was trained by sort of the masters of verite, because I was trained at Maisels Films in the 90s. So, for me, my skills are very much in verite and in writing and in ghost directing. and managing a creative team. So I like to partner with other producers who are very good at fundraising, and then nurturing the whole distribution process and the marketing process. So.
Got it. No, that's good, because I think a lot of producers are maybe unsung heroes in their projects in a way. And then what do you, in terms of the projects you do take on, is there an aesthetic you look for? Is there like a philosophy the projects that you want to get involved with, or is it just kind of more random than that?
Well, you could say it was random, but I would say it's driven by my curiosity. One is, am I curious about this thing? And do I want to learn about it? Because every documentary film is an opportunity to sort of become like a low-grade expert in a subject. And it is so much fun. And it's so much fun to recreate that for viewers and, for audiences. Like, it was so amazing to learn about how, what's going on with wildlife conservation today and the things that the people in far eastern Russia do and how they live and who they're collaborating with. That was so exciting. If you'd asked me a year before if I wanted to go to Russia and ride around on a snowmobile with a guy with an AK-47 slung over his shoulder so we could find tiger tracks in the snow, I would have been like, are you insane? That doesn't interest me at all. But once I dug in, I got so excited about it, and I knew we could bring that to the screen. So for me, it's really about just getting excited about the subject matter. And a lot of things are really interesting.
Yeah, that is for sure. I want everyone to check out Xan online, subscribe, follow her on Twitter. There you are, Xan Parker. Yeah, you can learn about some of her projects and what's on her mind. Last question for you, Xan. You mentioned the Maisel shop that you were learning from, in effect. Who are some of the filmmakers that you've admired from afar, or some who mentored you that you'd like to share with the audience?
Thank you for asking that. The filmmakers who trained me are Susan Franke, Deborah Dixon, and Albert Maisels. And Albert Maisels is no longer with us. He's sort of the most famous, but I would actually have to say that the real skill and craft was in the hands of Susan Franke and Deborah Dixon at that company. And talk about unsung heroes. That was a time when women's credits just weren't celebrated as much, when they were making a lot of the early films that they were making in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And they are just two amazing storytellers. And I have to say, learned almost everything I know from them. And their films are great. Look them up. I think the film that I'm most proud of working on with them, which was, now going back to the millennium, so 20 years ago. I actually don't know if it's streaming anywhere, but it's called Lolly's Kin, and it's about poverty in the Mississippi Delta. And it is incredibly relevant to the time that we're going to now, as we're talking about racial justice, because it is just one of those stories that through a verite story and just a few characters that are followed for a couple of years and how their life develops and what happens to them, you walk away from it with an understanding of why poverty is, sort of how poverty is perpetuated and how it comes from the concept of race in America. But those are films that I really love. I actually watched a film last night that I loved called On the Record by Kirby Dick and Amy Ziering. It premiered at Sundance this year when our film Rebuilding Paradise premiered, but I didn't get a chance to see it there. It's so well done. What Kirby and Amy do is incredibly important. They call out systemic sexual harassment and oppression of women and rape, and it is brave. It's hard. I don't know if I could do it. I'm so happy that they do it, because I watched it with my kids, and I was really I felt fortunate to be able to share something like that with them that's so well done. So I would call that out for now. Another film, actually, that I will call it quickly is another old film called Hoop Dreams that another mentor of mine, Peter Gilbert, made. He was a cinematographer and a director, and he's an excellent filmmaker, and he also taught me a lot.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all those. Those are all great jumping off points for everyone to learn about. I want to thank you, Dan, for being on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun. I hope everyone does well during quarantine. Doesn't get too depressed.
That's our show today, everyone. Make sure to subscribe to my social media to learn who will be on the show, who we will be featuring, and try to take care of the art, because the art will always take care of you. Stay safe out there. Bye, everyone.